Hello, my name is King Wu. I'm going to present the Java project for our group, and this is our group member details. Let's jump to the Java code. So first of all, I'm going to run this Java script to show the user interface as well as the basic functions of this Java project. So this is the first user interface. We can put a username and a password. For example, if I put this username and password, because it don't have matching records in my SQL database, it will return login failed, try again. If I try this one, because it exists in the MySQL database, so it will show login successful and jump to the second user interface. I can click show, and this table will list all the existing properties in my SQL database. We can also add one property here. We can click add. This is the displayed message, and we click show. We can see now the new property has been in the list. We can also delete a property. We click delete button. This is the displayed message, and we can click show. Now the property has been removed from the list. So this is the basic user interfaces and the functions of our JavaScript. Now let's jump to our code, Java code. So the first method is called validate login. It belongs to the class login, and it takes two string parameters, and it will return a string parameter. This part is to connect to the MySQL database. This is the connection URL, and the database name is property. This is the username for MySQL database. This is the password. Once it has been connected, it will print out this message. This part is to execute a SQL query, and the result will be returned to this rs result set. The SQL here is select everything from login table where username like input username, which is one of the input parameters. So this part is to check the input username and the input password matches the existing records returned from this SQL query. And if it matches, we will assign login successful to validation return message. And finally, this method will return this variable, which is validation return message. So this is our first method. Our second and third method belongs to the class rental property. And the second method is add rental property. It takes three parameters here, and it returns one variable, one string variable. And this part is used to connect the SQL database. And this part is to execute one SQL query. The SQL query is insert into property.rental property values, property ID, address, and postcode, which is taken from the input parameters. And once this SQL has been executed successfully, we will assign property added successfully to this variable, which is add rental property return message. And this method will return this string variable. And our third method is called delete rental property. It takes one parameter here and return one string variable. which is this variable. This part is to connect to the MySQL database, and this part is to execute one SQL query, which is delete from property.rentalProperty, where property ID equals to property ID, which is the input variable. Once this SQL has been executed successfully, we will assign property is deleted successfully into this variable. And finally, this method will return this variable, which is delete rental property return message. So these are our methods. Now we jump onto our first user interface. So it is class app, and it is the entrance of this application. So all these JavaScripts are used for the development of the user interface. And this is the event of clicking the login button. So this part is to read the text message from text fields, and we create an instance of class login, and now we call the method validate login, and the input parameters will be the values reading from the text fields. And the return message will be assigned to this string variable, which is return message. And this part is to check the value of return message. If it is login successful, then the label for text will be login successful, and we will have the second user interface, which is action page. If the value is not login successful, then the label for message will be login failed, and try again. And now we will jump to the action page, which is the second user interface. So action page is a class, and these are all the JavaScript to create the user interface. And this is the show button event. So basically what will happen if we click show button. And this part is to clear the data in the table in the user interface, basically reset the table. And this part is to connect to the MySQL database. And this part is to execute a SQL query and assign the result to this result set RS. And the SQL query is select everything from rental property table. And this JavaScript here is to populate the table in the user interface with the data returned from this SQL query, which is select everything from rental property. And so every time we click show, the data from this table will be populated into the table in the user interface. This is the add button event. So basically, we read the data from all the text fields and assign them to these variables, and we create an instance of the rental property class, and then we call the method add rental property, and the parameters will be the values reading from these text fields, and the return message will be assigned to this variable, which is return message, and we will check the value of return message here, and if it is property added successfully, then the label 5 will have the text as this one. If not, it will have text as this one. And this part is to reset all the values in the text fields. And finally, we will have the delete button event action. So basically, this is to assign the value in the text fields to these variables, and now we create an instance of the class rental property, and we call the method delete rental property, and the parameter will be the values reading from the text fields, and the return message will be assigned to this variable, and we will check the value of this return message and update the text of label 5 accordingly. And finally, we will reset all the values of the text fields. And thanks everyone, this is our project.